Travis. No pressure there. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you all today. 28 years in the Navy. I retired in 2014. So I'm going to tell you 28 years in about 15 minutes. Hopefully I can hit the high points and really talk about the opportunities that I got while being in the military and the U.S. Navy. First thing I want to tell you about is when you're in the military, there are about 4 things that everybody in the military, whether they retire or just get out after a few years, share. First is my I love me wall. So my husband's also military. This is my half of the office. His half has his I love me stuff on it as well. These are things that remind us of our time in the military, remind us of friends past and present, and really talk about the career that we had. Second, almost every single person that served in the United States military can rattle off every duty station that they've ever been at. And any significant events are related to those duty stations, and you know what happened when because of where you lived, because you move around so much. So for my duty stations over my 28 years, I was in San Diego to start with. I was in Pensacola. I went to flight school in Pensacola, and I also served at the Naval Aerospace Medical Institute there. I then transferred to Omaha, Nebraska, and was at United States Strategic Command when it stood up. I then transferred to the Marines, and that's the picture you see on your screen now. I flew in the back seat of F-18s with Marine Air Group 31. We had 7 squadrons that flew the Hornet. I then transferred to the Navy Personnel Command in Millington, Tennessee, and then to BUMED, the Bureau of Medicine and Surgery. I worked for the Surgeon General of the Navy in Washington, D.C., and we were there for 9/11, and we were there for the sniper and also for the anthrax scares. I then went to Hawaii and had 3 consecutive assignments, all in leadership positions, doing preventive medicine to start with, and then I was at the U.S. Pacific Fleet. And then I held a command position with the Navy Medical Research Unit number 2, which did infectious disease research in Southeast Asia. And then I transferred to San Antonio, and I was the head of all the Navy's medical education and training. And from there, I retired. The third thing people will know that have been in the military, whether they're veterans or are retirees, is how long you served. So I served 28 years, 4 months, and 5 days. And you know it to the day. And finally, you may meet somebody that's in the military or even past military, and you kind of look at them a little funny. You say, you look really familiar to me. How might I know you? And they'll say, well, did you serve in the military? Well, yeah. And then you go through the list of all the places you've been until you narrow it down. This actually happened to my stepson at one of my changes of command, where he happened to know my command master chief and figured out that the 2 of them had been in the same safe house. My Navy master chief and my stepson, who was Army, were in the same safe house in Afghanistan. So you never know who you're going to meet or where you're going to meet them. It's a very small military, even though it seems very large. So let me get you to my talk. Travis, go ahead and switch us to the next slide. We're going to talk about opportunity. And one thing that I used to hear over and over again as I went through my naval career was that success is where preparation meets opportunity. So if you're not prepared and you don't grab an opportunity, chances are your success is going to be limited. So the slide you see is a picture of me with President Bush. One day when I was in Washington, D.C. during President Bush's term as our president, I got a phone call from the Chief of Naval Operations Office that the president wanted to go out to one of our naval aircraft carriers, but he needed to go through the fitting for flight gear because he wanted to go out on a Navy aircraft and land on the deck. Most of you may have seen that on the TV at the time on the USS Abraham Lincoln. So that phone call came in to me because I happened to be the program manager for survival training and consequently flight gear. And I said, I'm going to do it. So I grabbed that opportunity and all the arrangements went through. I prepared myself. I probably over-prepared myself. I even had an ejection seat in the back of my vehicle from the aircraft that he was going to go out to the carrier on. Secret Service did not think that was such a good idea. They didn't think that that should be something that we drag through the press corps. So we put all the flight gear in little baskets. We met the president at the pool. We did his briefing about the ejection seat and the flight gear. And then I actually got to push him into the pool. When he got out, we sat out together, fit all of his flight gear, made sure his helmet fit him, got him all ready to go. And then when he got out to San Diego, he was all ready to get on that Navy jet and go out to the aircraft carrier. It was a rare opportunity. It was just an awesome day, and I can't say enough good things about President Bush. Next slide. I talked a little bit about being in Hawaii. When I was in Hawaii, most of my work was done in Southeast Asia. Each year we did something called Pacific Partnership. It was a mission that the medical department in the Navy did with a number of non-governmental organizations, groups like Project Smile, Smile Train, and they would get on a Navy ship and visit 5 or 6 countries. In advance of all those missions, we had to go out and prepare for the mission. So this is a picture of us meeting with a provincial governor in a small island province in eastern Indonesia, very heavily Muslim area. They had never met an American. And so he was very excited to welcome the United States military. And you'll see a number of different uniforms there. We actually were Army, Navy, and Air Force on this in this group. But we were able to spend about a half a day with him. And as a consequence of this mission, after we brought in the hospital ship, Mercy, the viewpoint of the United States was dramatically increased in this part of the world, in Indonesia. And so by seizing this opportunity, we were able to change the view of a number of individuals that had never met an American and had never seen an American. And we were able to make an impact for the United States. Not something a lot of people realize the military is involved in. Next slide, Travis, please. Another great opportunity that I got to enjoy was initial meetings with the Vietnamese Army. So this is the Vietnamese People's Army, and their Surgeon General is in the center of that photo between the 2 gentlemen in the front. I'm in the back. But I was in charge of an infectious disease research lab that was headquartered at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, but I had laboratories in Singapore and in Cambodia. And the Vietnamese were very eager to engage with us to do infectious disease research. They had a horrible dengue fever problem, malaria problem, things that we as Americans don't really worry about here, but they're very prevalent in Southeast Asia. And so we were able to engage with the Vietnamese, set up some protocols in order to do some research with them and help them come up with solutions that would help them combat some of these diseases. This was the initial meeting. We actually had several follow-on meetings. So I've been to Vietnam a number of times. It's a beautiful country, lovely people, and they were very eager to welcome Americans. And I know I've heard that now the tourism is actually growing quite a bit in Vietnam. And I hope that it's as a result of some of their research into infectious diseases that's allowing tourism to grow. On this slide also, you'll see some significant places in Vietnam. On the one side of the photo there is a plaque that's outside Halo Prison, that's the Hanoi Hilton. We were able to visit, and on the other side is a statue to John McCain, and behind that statue is the lake where the late John McCain, when he ejected out of his aircraft, the Vietnamese fished him out of that lake. Curiously, that John McCain was Navy. That statue has a plaque on it that denotes him as being from the Air Force. So we kind of chuckled about that when we saw it. And we pointed it out to the Vietnamese, but they didn't think it was so funny. Next slide. Another significant opportunity that I was given and that I took, actually kind of pushed forward a little bit, was in the Lao People's Democratic Republic. So if you'll recall, Vietnam is communist and Lao is also communist. This is a picture of me representing the US in an agreement with Lao. In the background, you'll see behind me on that side of the table is the US delegation. The woman in orange is our US ambassador to Lao. And then on the other side of the room were the Laotian people. And we signed an agreement basically to agree to cooperate. My team was already doing infectious disease research in Lao and in Vientiane, which is the capital of Lao. And I had been there several times, had developed a relationship with the Ministry of Health and with the government, interacted significantly with the ambassador, that's Karen Stewart, the ambassador. And she welcomed us back a number of times. And then ultimately, we were able to sign this agreement between the US and Lao that we would continue to cooperate and work together. And of course, we were able to provide significant equipment to Lao so that they could do their own research with our assistance. And we engaged with them on a number of projects that they will continue to work on. Next slide. And finally, I think this is probably my most important and my dearest slide, and probably the greatest opportunity that I have had in my military career. And that was to make new friends, to see places around the world that a lot of people don't get to see or that aren't available for people to see, and also to help and make improvements in the lives of people that are less fortunate than we are. So to run around the slides here a little bit, in the top left side, that's a group in Australia at the Malaria Institute who were doing malaria research, and we were working with them. And next to that, you know, the white uniforms, of course, are Navy uniforms, but we were meeting with the Singapore government because I had a lab in Singapore. We were working with Duke University, located in Singapore, the National University there, and developed really great relationships with the Singapore military. Next to that is a temple in Laos. The gentleman on the far left is our current Navy Surgeon General. He was a captain at the time and was actually my boss. Down in the lower right corner is Siem Reap. Anyone who's seen Lara Croft Tomb Raider, you'll recognize these four-sided figures. This is where that movie was filmed. And next to that is the tomb of Ho Chi Minh. And we were able to get access to the front of the tomb. We could not go in, but we did get a picture in front of it. And then my good friend Allison, who's a New Zealand Navy captain. And then a group from Singapore and Australia. The red uniform is Australia. Their dress uniform. And then in the lower left corner is a picture of some kids that we were working with in Cambodia. We did a lot of research in Cambodia trying to help with their diarrheal diseases. Next slide. 15 minutes is not a lot of time. I could have talked all day about my career. This is it. This was a picture of me, one of my last flights in an F-18 at Marine Air Group 31 with one of the squadrons there. And I just wanted to use this slide to honor all the other veterans that might be listening today, and especially those women who chose to serve. You know, I started in '86 and there weren't a lot of women in the military. It was rare to find someone else in uniform, rarer to find someone who was an officer. It was a man's Navy, but I wouldn't change a thing that I did. And I was so glad that I raised my hand and I served and I seized that opportunity, because really has defined who I am and hopefully who I will be. So with that, I would welcome any questions that you might have. And thank you so much for letting me talk with you today.